And if it keeps this small, I don't know if we need introductions, but
Right, I was gonna
you
say,
do
well,
have a quorum.
I was looking, I'm like, well, I don't know, but I'll start with number one. Welcome and introductions and any announcements. We kind of all know each other, but if you want to reintroduce yourself as a new person for 2022, I am open for it. Or any announcements that you may have. I'll give you a second to kind of go in. If not, we can jump to number two. There's no, there's no topic, so.
Yeah, let's jump into number two, Nicole.
Well, we do have someone to add. Terry, I think someone is connected.
One of our applicants.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, cool. Hello, Terry. Thank you for joining. Right on time for number two.
You're welcome. I'll just be on for about a half hour, and then I have an appointment I couldn't change. So just wanted to listen in while I could.
No problem.
And
So,
I have a super brief announcement. It's the same announcement I'm given for some time, but Rubicon Programs is hiring. And so please go to our website, send folks there. If you know folks who want to work in re-entry, want to work passionately and expertly to help communities and folks break the cycle of poverty, working with parents. Please send them to Rubicon Programs website, and I will, put that website in the chat. Thank you for letting me do that. My, announcements that I do almost all the time. It's been really hard to hire recently. I'm sure we're not the only organization. So just, spreading the word where I can. And I'm Lila Blanchard, and this is my third year on the CAB, and I am going to be in the first couple of meetings for programs and services, and then I'm going to be saying goodbye, and I'm going to be solely focusing on policy and budget subcommittee. So it's great to be here, and Nicole is amazing, and I'm super glad that you're going to be the chair for the second year in a row.
I learned from the best, and I felt a lot better this year. I can definitely tell you that. And I even got up extra early and read notes and made little. So I promise you, year two is like a whole different feel. So awesome. I appreciate you giving an announcement. And let's see here. Any other announcements?
Yeah, I go along with Lila. Rossmore is having to shut down some of our swimming because we can't get lifeguards. So this is a strange thing to bring up, but if you happen to know anyone who is a lifeguard and they're looking for work, we're paying more than other pools in the area, and yet we still can't get enough people. If you want to supplement your income, there's your chance.
If I can swim really good, I would take you up on that offer.
I'll keep my kids in mind, but they're a little bit young still.
Okay, any other updates? I'll give an update from a sheltering perspective, and which would really be something great for Rubicon as well. In reference to AB 109, we are taking individuals that are does not just fall under AB 109 supervision. So if they have court probation or I can't talk right now. Go ahead and send referrals over to me. If it's something I'm not sure of, I can definitely check for an approval, but I am able to kind of help individuals outside of our normal standard. We've also been able to assist them with staying with their family if they need to, as well as some short-term hotel stay, and still the permanent supportive housing. So most of them referrals that we may not be able to accept, I can accept them now, just kind of send them over to me and I'll take a look at them. So anyone in the reentry field that needs assistance with housing, send them over to Shelter Inc.'s way. Now I'm going to put back on my chair hat. Any other announcements before we move on? Okay. Number 2 for public comments. I know that Terry said that he can only be on for a short time, so I'm not sure if he has any comments. I have to share my screen too, all right?
No, thanks for asking.
Okay. And I'm going to share my screen.
Other than to say, I'm hoping what I get approved that I can join and be a part of this committee.
And if you get
Wonderful.
approved, we will hope to have you too. The more the merrier. Are you all able to see my screen with the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Nicole, I'm okay to move on to number 3. I'm so used to you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3 for approval of the minutes from November 18th, which is on, I don't believe we put the attachment in the comments, but if not, I have it up on page 4. So I'll go ahead and go down to page 4 from our November 18th meeting, and I'll go ahead and go through this.
It's a long one.
Okay.
We won't be doing as detailed minutes moving forward, but now that we're officially recording all of these, so, but yes.
so
Feel
I'll
free
go
to
ahead. I'll
give
scroll
yourself
through.
some time.
Yeah, give you some time. Let me know if you need me to stay in one area for a certain second so we can read it. So.
Nicole, are the recordings going to be available for people?
Oh yeah, we post them all in the agenda center. I try to do it soon after we convene the meeting
Okay.
or adjourn the meeting, but I reference the links in the actual minutes themselves.
Okay, to move on to the next item number 2. Okay, so I'm gonna scroll down.
I'm ready to make a motion on the notes if we're done reviewing, but if I'm if I'm ahead of the curve, I can wait a few more minutes as well.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I've read that before.
Okay.
Nicole, do you need to ask if there's any questions about these or comments about these, and then we vote?
Public comment just needs to be made before I do roll call vote, so it can happen before the motion's made or after.
Got it. I would just say that, I mean, it made me sad to see these notes and think about Dr. Hernandez. She was such an instrumental part of this subcommittee. And so, just continuing to remember her in the different spaces, that I'm showing up here. And I don't have any questions or comments beyond that. And I'm ready to make a motion to approve those if there are no other questions or comments.
Any other questions or comments, or anyone want to second that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have Lila that did the motion and Dale for second the motion. Unless there's any other
Okay.
comments. I don't have any comments for this section either.
Okay, if there's no public comment, I will move on to roll call vote. Nicole?
Aye.
Dale?
Yes,
Lila?
Yes.
And Dr. Cole?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I'm gonna scroll back up real quick. Okay, so our next topic on the agenda is to discuss our subcommittee members and roles that we kind of designated on our, and I just had a blank on our last retreat that we had. Thank you. I was looking for the word. So I know last time we left off, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know Dale was up for the second chair, but we wanted to give that option also to Dr. Cole because he wasn't available, if he wanted that role, correct? That's the notes that I have from that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the time to discuss who would be the vice chair and then who would take just the recording, the template the report out template, who would be kind of taking those bullet point notes. So they officially call it the recorder. I think Lila, you'd mentioned, I don't know if it's in the operating guidelines, but that historically the vice chair had been the recorder. I don't know if that was just an automatic thing or if that is actually in the operating guidelines. I had not checked, but.
That's how we had been doing it, but in the policy and budget subcommittee, it was brought up by, shucks, my mind is blanking out right now. What's the chair's name of that subcommittee?
Crawford.
Thank you. Crawford had mentioned that that those are two separate roles, and so it would be 3 roles. So essentially, yeah, there would be a chair, a vice chair, and a recorder.
Mm-hmm.
what is the role of the recorder?
Do you want me to jump in there, Nicole?
I was gonna ask you the same thing. Do you want me to jump in? So the role of the recorder is to take the notes and everything that we discuss on our actual call, and then they are to complete that attachment that Nicole shared and send that back to Nicole and Monique. So it's basically recording what we discussed today.
Well, it's not, I just want to be clear, it's not minutes because I'm doing that on my end. It's more of like high level bullet points, kind of what
Yes.
what you did for the ambassador program, where you guys had like, a few bullet points of, I mean, some things that are important to take note of is like next steps or actual action items or homework that people are kind of taking off, outside of this meeting to do, but also any action that we're asking the full body to take. Outreach is a very good example. When they do interview an applicant, the action in that report out is to bring that candidate to the full body to vote for a nomination. So there's an action there to be had. So those kind of things would be documented.
Well, obviously getting access to the recording would certainly be helpful.
And I do try to post those pretty soon after the meeting is
Yeah,
adjourned.
well, because there's a small group here, I'd be willing to take on the recorder role. And then Nicole, if you could maybe send me an email and let me know how I can get to the agenda center so that I can listen to the recordings, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Would you be interested in vice chair?
You cut out there a little bit, Nicole.
Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. And I was asking Dr. Cole if he'll be interested in vice chair for such a small group. So
Nicole, I appreciate the offer. However, I'll be shifting, as Lila said, echoed. I'll be shifting over to policy here once we could get more participation in this committee. So if that wasn't the case, yeah, definitely. However, or if temporarily, if necessary, during the process, I don't know how that would work. Nicole, could you kind of chime in on that if that's a possibility for temporary?
Nicole, myself.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can temporarily appoint someone. But I mean, I guess I want to go back to the recorder position. You know, we haven't always recorded these meetings and may not be in the future if we go back in person. And I just want to encourage that, try to document what you can, like in the meeting itself. That would be my only concern in relying on that recording to develop those bullet points. It's very high level, like I said, like the ambassador program. And the reason I'm pointing that out is I think that if for some reason, you know, at some point, if Dr. Cole moves over to policy and budget, when that happens, I do think that a vice chair can be the recorder. But that is something that that is possible and manageable. I mean, those that have been vice chairs before, I mean, it's my understanding the vice chair is really just stepping in when the chair can't be there. And that's doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen with people being off for vacation or whatnot, but or conflict with the meeting. But
So
other than that,
so would it be safe to say for if Dell doesn't mind, because you know Lila or Dr. Cole may eventually move over. For Dell, if you don't mind, it's just being vice chair as well as recorder. In reference to vice chair, like Nicole said, it's only really if I'm not here, or maybe we can appoint someone for time being.
that would be the two options.
Yeah, but my concern is if we don't, hopefully we get more people, but but if we don't and they both leave, then we're back at that scenario anyway. So.
Right.
Could I make a comment?
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yes.
Thanks. This might be getting ahead, but you know, I don't know what the timeline is for approval as a member, but once I become a member, and then if I become a member of this committee, I'd be happy to be the recorder if it's helpful to know that now.
And I'll just jump in because we did find out a little bit more information about when the next CCP meeting would be, which is where your appointment would be made if you're nominated and pushed forward. So we're looking at April is when that meeting would happen. So you probably wouldn't come on board to this subcommittee until maybe April, late April, May, early May.
Okay, thanks.
It sounds to me like it might make more sense then to appoint Dale as the vice chair and the recorder if he's comfortable with that. And I'll just add that, you know, I'm planning on, you know, being part of this subcommittee as long as it makes sense and until, you know, other folks join. Yeah. So And I'll just put this out there. I wonder if it makes sense for both Terrence and I to be kind of in that, holding pattern. Dr. Cole, yeah, I don't know if that's as helpful to the subcommittee. Yeah, so I'll just put that out there. I was in the subcommittee for the last couple years, and so I thought, in this transition time, I can also, speak to the history to some degree.
It would be beneficial.
Well, I'm willing to be the vice chair. My preference would be someone who has been, with CAB for a couple of years with more background and experience. But if we don't have that, I'd be glad to accept that and work with it.
Thank you, Dan.
As long as Nicole Green guarantees to never miss a meeting.
I'll try not to, like last time. I would definitely try not to. Life happens.
And so just the other piece to this that I wanted to call out. So you might be recording, which is essentially the report out for this meeting. But by default, when we go to the full body, say, like what is it, next week? 2 weeks from now, Nicole would be reporting out with those notes. She would be basically using that as kind of her little cheat sheet to kind of communicate to the full body what's going on in this subcommittee. And it also becomes an attachment in that agenda packet. But for some reason, if she can't be at the full body meeting, then the vice chair would step in and report out on her behalf. Does that make sense?
You're muted, Dale.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so I think we have all our roles, me as chair, Dale as vice chair, and also my lovely recorder, and Lila and Dr. Cole will be here for the interim to determine when it's not needed anymore for them to move on to their subcommittee. And I really appreciate you, Lila, for staying, because you do have this history. You put a lot of love and work into the subcommittee, so I want to always make sure I acknowledge that. So I appreciate you staying here with me for a little while I take over, as always. So, Nicole, do we have to vote on that, or are we okay?
No vote on that.
Okay. So next section here is looking at the work plan for 2022, which I'm excited about. Let me scroll down. Sorry to scroll so fast. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at the work plan and kind of decide what changes we want to make, or we want to some items that we took over from last year over, and kind of go through each section. So the first thing that stood out to me, and I know when I first came aboard, Nicole and Lila, we talked about this, and I tried to remember, the first thing that came out was that year. Do we change it now, or does it stay at 2021? I remember that came up last year. We had that long talk about it. I forgot
what does it say
was.
right now? What does the top say?
2021.
So I think that last year you guys decided to focus on an annual plan. I think some folks had a 2-year plan, but though the work might carry over what happened last year to this year, it's really an annual review of the work plan each year. And so the group had decided to just call it that. So this year it would be called 2022, if you stick with that kind of logic.
And would it also?
And I would take out the in development. Just call it 2002. And I think that was intended to come off, but it didn't.
Yeah, okay.
And we would just call it 2022 work plan.
And that was the first thing that stuck out. The second section that I looked at, or our first section that we'll review, is the research projects and advocacy. Apologize, I was not here for November, December. I know I looked at our notes from the last meeting that we had. I did see the bullets that Lila, or you all discussed about adding the housing perspective in there. We worked a lot on restorative justice. I believe that we completed majority of those tasks in reference to research, looking at best practices models. We had a lot of individuals coming out doing presentations. So I guess the focus is our goals and focus for this year are referenced around restorative justice. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I recall on one of our calls, I think there's like a program or something that's getting implemented in reference to restorative justice, if I heard correctly. Lada, did you mention something like that on the call?
Go ahead, Nicole. I could tell you
Oh.
were going to update on that.
I know
sorry.
that there was a Measure X funding that was
Yes.
dedicated to a restorative justice initiative that I don't have all the details on how that, what the amount of it, the funding was. But I know it was going to be dispersed among several different agencies tasked to take on a restorative justice initiative. And I believe ORJ might be part of that as well. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, so there is work to be had, and that's being done in that space. But I just don't have the details. I don't think it's at that point yet.
Right.
I think it might be in one of the agendas from the Measure X CAB that they have. They have a community advisory board themselves. And so I can look and dig and see if we can find some details to share with this group at the next meeting. But yes, to answer your question, there's a lot of work that's being done with the county right now with that. And I think that Patrice had also recommended in the last meeting that when we do get to the CCP and we do get agendized to discuss our recommendations from last year that we proposed in November, that when it gets to the line item, the recommendation that speaks to restorative justice, that there could be a conversation there as well.
I know that the Board of Supervisors still is they're going to be making decisions on dispersing some of the committed Measure X funds that's coming up. I don't know whether restorative justice would be considered in that, but I know that there still are some funds undesignated.
I scroll back up because even though I wasn't there and I apologize, I seen some notes in reference to what you were talking about regarding Patrice and things on the last agenda.
I want to say that there might even be some type of working group that is established because of this. And I know, Lila, you had mentioned having some type of committee at a county level last time around. So again, I apologize for not having all of the details on that, but I do recall that, and we can locate that information so we can get a little bit more clarity.
Okay. Well,
To basically answer your question, should this group focus on restorative justice if what's being done there is really answering a lot of the questions that you have?
Yes,
Maybe one of the action items is to be a player, what do they call a thought partner in that space.
Okay, so pretty much for that item, it's us waiting for that detail to make that determination. I do believe it should stay as an item, but what our subcommittee will actually do in reference to that or for this year is all depending on that Measure X information coming back to us, right? What do the rest of you all think? Dale? Lila?
Yes.
Yeah, it's, I underscore, what Nicole P was talking about. It sounds like it may even end up the initiative resting with the ORJ. And so, I think that this subtask or, could be updated. I don't think that we would be in the same space with it. And so maybe it's a bullet point of, attending CCP meeting and, supporting ORJ, as restorative justice subcommittee gets or work gets created, something along those lines.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It does. I definitely agree with you. The section will have to be updated. Is that something that we can update now, or we will have to wait until we find out about Measure X first, right? To kind of determine how we're going to actually do that, or just make that assumption? Because I mean, I do agree it's not going to stay the same, right?
Would we want to get some ideas from Patrice?
So Nicole, that's something.
Yeah, I
that-
think that she was gonna follow up with you, Nicole, before this meeting. Unfortunately, we're all in review panels right now for AB 109. And I think that's why that didn't happen. So I apologize for that. But yeah, I do think it would be a follow-up to her to just get more information about that. I think that, you know, I don't know how much of this initiative is in, initiatives that are going to be quick resolutions within the county versus long projects that span over the course of a few years. And so depending on that, you know, that might determine how you guys want to approach continuing to focus on it. So
We could make it super broad and just say, you know, move from resource search to support of restorative justice program in county. And then that way, whatever the work looks like, it kind of fits in there. And you know, when I think with this last work plan, honestly, we would discuss it in the meetings, and then I would make the updates, and then we would vote on it in, you know, the following meeting. And so, you know, Nicole, if you feel comfortable, you know, capturing some of these pieces in there, I bet if you don't, I bet our ORJ would also help make the updates to the work plan, and then it can just be presented at the following meeting.
Yeah, making it broad makes sense to me, Lila, because then that way specific details could possibly change during the course of the year. And as long as we're making it broad, we're basically saying whatever is determined will be supported.
I agree with that.
I do have a question. My recollection is on this work plan, and I think it's further down, but I'm not positive. Are we to visit CBOs?
That's a little bit further down. Are we okay with this section in reference to the recommended change? And I can go down to the next section. I'm okay with making it vague until we have more information.
would it be helpful for me to just share the Word doc and we can just kind of work off,
Oh,
off of
sure.
that?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
you want to stop sharing your screen because we're going to have to eventually, I mean, it may not be looking very pretty at the end of this
It's okay.
meeting, but I just think that might be easier for us to do that. Let me change. All right, give me a moment here. Oh, I'm gonna share my screen now. Let's see, can you see the work plan?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put track changes on this. And so we're calling this 2022. And sorry, so under the research projects, was there a specific language said instead of research? I guess the subtasks that we would support instead of research, support the effort that the county is making in this restorative justice initiative.
Sounds good. I would
Or
also
support, or just take out research and put support best practice program models. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, take out research.
Yeah, wonderful.
Program models, governance structures. And I
Yeah,
think,
and we can update this when we learn more, but like I said, if there is a space for being a thought partner, that could be maybe an additional subtask or something.
like that piece that Lila added, and sorry if I said it wrong, where she indicated a support to RJ, and I always say the acronyms incorrectly. CHP. That's it, right? Yeah.
DCP?
CCP. I told you I was gonna say it
Okay.
wrong, Nicole.
And
I still got vacay break. Sorry.
do we need to, on the far right, since Lila is not going to be with us, excuse me, for the entire year, should Lila's name be removed?
We should put all.
I mean, one thing that and Lila can speak more to this, but one of the things that policy and budget did was just focus on what was it that we're going to focus on, and then the next time around, the next meeting in March, focus on who's going to do what. That might make for you guys to get through more today, to just focus on responsible persons next time around.
Yeah,
That would
you
be
can
nice.
delete my name for that, because, you know, for the entirety of the space, not gonna happen. You know, and I think we were gonna try to leave the language broad enough that where we can support restorative justice work within the county. Yeah, so if we want to mention, you know, within the county, since things are beginning to move forward. And then I wanted to see if we, so there might be some research, you know, later on down the road, but I don't know if that'll be coming from this subcommittee, or if that would be coming from ORJ, et cetera. So definitely decreasing the role of research sounds good to me. And then housing came up quite a bit, you know, for this subcommittee. And so I'm just wondering, you know, do we want to put that here as another subtask, or be subtask instead of restorative justice? Just, you know, putting that out there, because I don't think that's anywhere else on the document, you know, a focus on housing is identified.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was going to be my next point after we completed the restorative justice. I believe it should go for a second tab, because we still are focusing on restorative justice as well. That'll be another item that we were going to add to the work plan and look more in detail in it for 2022. I'm sorry, I made some notes about that.
I know that there's also a large amount of Measure X funds that was dedicated to housing as well. I think Jill had brought up in the CAB retreat and one of the CAB general meetings, if not this meeting itself.
Thank you.
So it might be one of those, a similar approach here where we're supporting what the county's doing as opposed to recreating the wheel.
I have a note. I believe Patrice mentioned that there's some Measure X funding that could present opportunity. And
is it specific type of housing, or are we keeping it broad?
from I recall from the last conversations last year, we were looking at reentry, but trying to expand it for individuals that don't just fall under AB 109. There's been some talk about like mental health or individuals when it comes to their age and different things like that. I also know, let's see here. I believe RJ on our last call we had is, I won't say collaborating, because she's not collaborating, but working with H3. So there's some work around there too, in reference to sharing data. So I think it's looking at housing from abroad. It's just not focused on just AB 109 supervision. It's all reentry population and the housing programs that's out there and the services that it's providing. I mean, it's also a good topic to look into, and that's just my opinion with the changes that's coming up with the programs, right? And what's being expected. So looking at how the program models are. What are you guys' thoughts about that? But I do believe we should add housing as a bullet.
I do too. And the Advisory Council on Aging has a housing work group. I'm a member of that work group, and so there's focus there. And then there's a lot of work being done on homelessness in the county and trying to eliminate homelessness. And that, of course, ties in with housing as well as mental health. So I don't know whether we might also want to support the efforts of eliminating homelessness. I guess we have to be careful. We don't want to take on so much that I guess we can't handle it. But
Well, I know on the last meeting, Lila, the way that you explained housing, I do like. I wasn't on that call, but I do have a note. You noted it as research projects and advocacy in support of CAB policy platform, to kind of keep it like, I would love to get some more information back from RJ. And the reason why housing was brought up was just based on information that we received from Patrice and Denise in reference to areas that they were interested in the subcommittee looking at for housing. And I know one of them was looking at reentry, but not just focusing on AB 109 supervision and the programs that was out there, looking at how the programs are structured and providing support.
That's a great point. Maybe we want to add in here, expanding housing resources for reentry beyond just AB 109. But I think that the point here is that the Programs and Services Subcommittee wants to identify gaps in housing services and or huge need in the community, and potentially suggest some ways that additional types of housing support could be funded or added. So the research projects and advocacy is around like exploring an issue and then coming up with some kind of way to address the issue. So yeah, hopefully that made some sense.
And we can definitely expand on it more when we come back. We're throwing out ideas, so good start.
I think it's important that the way you've added it, Nicole P., within the county, because we just learned yesterday at our board meeting that the city of Walnut Creek has voted to expand housing, excuse me, housing in Walnut Creek. So there's definitely a focus on housing in Walnut Creek, and I'm sure probably many other cities here too.
Yeah, they're also doing the same thing in Brentwood and Oakley.
Yeah, and they've done a lot in what is it, Richmond, converting like I think there's an old Motel 6 that is being converted to housing for people.
Okay.
Another big theme that came up when we were talking in the Programs and Services, in the Policy and Budget Subcommittee, is that there are sometimes overlap with the work that we're doing in our subcommittees and then other committees outside. And so I'm really glad that, that we're mentioning that there are already spaces where housing and homelessness is the focus of what they're doing. So I wonder if it makes sense for the CAB in general to have somebody sit in on the racial justice oversight body regularly and provide reports back on that meeting, as well as the homelessness subcommittee. Nicole, you might hold the map better than I do. I get confused, like who does what and where.
That's actually one of the things that I'd requested that Jonte agendize for our next general meeting in March, because we last January had appointed CAB members to some of the external board meetings that we like the quack and the HIP, the holistic intervention prevention, Reentry Success Center has a steering committee. And so I think that the intent at the retreat was to kind of talk about as a group some of the other things, some of the other committees or work groups out there in the county that CAB might make sense to be a thought partner with. And I don't think we just ran out of time. And so I'm glad that you're bringing it up now, because I think this is an example of something that might you bring back to as an action to the board in March, that, hey, we recommend at least discussing it, or we have, some ideas about certain committees that we should have a CAB representative join. Or maybe you just keep it within this specific subcommittee, but you can decide that at the full body as well. I think that's great to be thinking about where should they be sitting to learn about this information, to be able to help the work that they're doing. The Council on Homelessness, the COH is, I think, what you're referring to. I actually just sat on one of their meetings just the other day. I think it was yesterday. And they're actually trying to redo their bylaws, and I joined because I wanted to help with ours. And they said that they had been referred to CABS as a good model. So I just thought that was funny, but anyways, so yeah, they are very good and open to collaboration. So, so Council on Homelessness, Racial Justice Oversight Body. I would say a lot of the work that's being done there is in the data subcommittee, because there's such a focus on getting data within the community and different law enforcement agencies. And so I wouldn't necessarily want to commit CAB or recommend that CAB commits to sit on every single subcommittee, because I think that would be a lot. But if you're looking for like data to inform an initiative that eventually you want to present to the CCP that has a monetary value attached to it, that would be one of the subcommittees that you might want to join to learn a little bit more about the data. Or even influence some of the data that you think should be requested that maybe they had not thought of.
Yeah, I've been attending the COH meetings and very active actions taking place. I think could be helpful for us, Nicole, to have someone attend those meetings and share information.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was
But I know we're
lumping,
go ahead, sorry.
I was kind of lumping in Racial Justice Oversight Body. I think that would more be a request from the Policy and Budget Subcommittee. But yeah, so I don't know if we want to have this in these points, like, collaborate with other committees that are directly, impacting this issue. We could, add that to the housing one if we want to, or just leave it as is.
I mean, it makes sense. And like you said, not to duplicate the work. So collaboration is important. Again, I don't mind adding it. I'm okay with that.
And I think it's fine with, wait, there you go. Okay. I like it. I'll let you type and I'll stop talking.
And I was gonna say, for the time being, even though I know Dale pointed that out, like the persons and resources, since we're so small, do we just want to just say all members for now? There's not really much to discuss about who will take what, because it's so small of a group. So
Would you think that these bullets that you have right now in this first initiative is really a white paper at this point, or that needs to be defined? They don't seem like white paper. I don't know. I guess my point I'm making is that looking at these 3 subtasks, they seem like collaboration with work that's being done, as opposed to starting a research project for something that hasn't been passed yet or kind of explored yet in the county. But I don't know. I don't know. I just, we have a white
That
paper
sounds-
TBD.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right to me. I mean, there was actually a white paper that was created, like this work plan has evolved over the last few years, and there was a white paper that was written around restorative justice in 2018 and then kind of like forgotten. Or, you know, I don't know, maybe it wasn't necessarily like core to the work plan the next year. But what I would say is that, yeah, that we're not saying that this will result in a white paper. We're saying that the subcommittee wants to focus on these areas. And if a white paper evolves, then that's great. So maybe it feels lighter just to take off, you know, white paper. And where it says timeline, complete research memos by November CAB meeting, it feels like these are ongoing throughout the year, but we do need to be aware of when the actual recommendations need to be submitted to the policy and budget subcommittee,
Yeah.
or to the vice chair, you know, who's writing that document. And that was something that I feel like we kind of struggled with each year in programs and services subcommittee, was getting the information that we wanted to give in a way that it was incorporated on time. Like, it still got incorporated, but it was very much like what they would hear from us from the meetings. It wasn't like we said, here are our recommendations, please include those in the policy and budget, in the policy recommendations.
This is what I would share with you, just in my experience of having gone through this process for the course of a year now. And so the target date that we're actually submitting recommendations for is the November CCP. So we're actually approving the recommendations in the October general meeting. But I think this is even too late, personally. You would want to probably get in front of policy and budget by September, if not August. So just something to keep in mind. I just feel like this is just too late. This is where, at the time frame that we're actually approving the recommendations, is October.
It seems like in August, we need to confirm the recommendations that we're going to make, and then in September, present them. And
Yep.
so that's really a short time period to, you know, to do work and to make,
It is.
you know.
So you may not be able to tackle all of these different topics just for that reason alone.
Well, Nicole, can we begin to look at how much ground has been made within the last year on one of the bullet points? Focus on that. If there's some challenges, if there are improvements, can we begin to move on to the second one based on data? Just to begin to identify through a lens of which we're capturing things we've made ground on in reference to recommendations, in reference to challenges or improvements, and begin the next year looking at how to better measure these things moving forward so that we can identify those things going into the next year that has really, you know, we can actually really move to the next, whatever that next bullet point is, instead of trying to do cluster everything in, and begin to identify through the data, number one, through the, you know, the prior year, and then begin to look at the pros and cons to the improvements versus the challenges. Just something to table to think about. If we can't get to all the bullet points, which one is most important, which one is next, and then go from there and make larger ground with one versus it being increments in reference to measuring three. If it's been challenging throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation is to find out more about what's going on with the Measure X funds for these two bullet points on housing and restorative justice, because someone made a presentation that resulted in a lot of funding to these two initiatives, right? I guess the question is, depending on what is the definition of this initiative, if it's tackling what this subcommittee is going after or not. And if it's not, then you might need to revise this, right? And the same with the housing. If it's not the type of housing that you are advocating for, it's not. I believe it's pretty broad, and there's different sub sections as far as how they want to allocate this funding for housing, expanding housing. But we don't know until we dig into that. And I'm sorry that Jill Ray's not here, because I know she'd be able to speak to this a lot better than I am right now. But I think until we know the answer to that question, because there's already funding on the table, and we'll be having discussions within the county to use these funds appropriately, right? To me, it seems like if it is in this wheelhouse for the work that's being done this subcommittee, it's being a thought partner in that space. And maybe that's what you're tackling this year, is being a thought partner in that space and helping drive what that looks like.
Maybe you could send
Yeah.
what we developed today to Jill for any feedback, Nicole, and then you could then communicate between meetings to us as to any comments Jill had, so that at our next meeting, we could maybe formalize this a little bit.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with Patrice on that. I'm not sure how she'd want to handle that. She might have this information that we're seeking. May not have to go to Jill. But yeah, there's definitely a follow-up after this meeting to get more clarity there.
On the third bullet, I would recommend that we add committees. In other words, collaborate with other external boards, committees, or work groups, because the work groups are identified by name as a work group as opposed to a committee.
Yeah, some of these might be public boards, committees, some of them may not. That's why I'm just kind of leaving it broad. A working group may not necessarily be a public meeting. It might just be a working group within external partners and internal partners within the county.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a public meeting.
Well,
So I guess I'm just trying to get it away from, it doesn't necessarily have to be a committee. It could be something that's not a public meeting. It's just a space.
yeah.
People are having these conversations.
Well, the housing work group, excuse me, is a public meeting. So I know that. That's the only one. No, the Council on Aging has 3 work groups, identified work groups, and housing is one of them. I don't remember what the other 2 are. I have that information.
I mean, I think at this point, and you can confirm or let me know what you all think. I think the way that we have it for the time being is okay, because we pretty much don't know what our next steps is going to be until we have the data, right? Back from Major X, if we're even going to look into it, or based on the information we get back, if the funding can go towards the housing or the restorative justice, then we kind of expand more and break out what those work groups are. We can always come back, right, and make those adjustments to it and kind of expand it a tad bit more.
Yes, you
Okay,
guys
I
can
think silence has a
continue
yes.
to.
Yes.
Because I'm just looking at that for the sake of time. We have I know there's 2, I think it's 2.
So I'm just indicating here that this October date may need to be sooner. I think that there needs to be some follow-up there.
Sounds good.
I think that we know.
Maybe we say as early as August, having our recommendations together. And I would, I like what Dr. Cole was speaking to earlier about prioritization. I mean, I feel like the third bullet point really connects to both of them. If we want to add in the third bullet point, the Measure X funds, especially the Measure X funds, we can. And then I would probably prioritize housing, first over restorative justice, just because, that was the focus last year, was restorative justice. And, if you want to have a new contribution or a new area of focus, then I would probably, select housing if folks on the committee want to go that way and are comfortable with
So you're suggesting collaborate with specifically the Measure X CAB, since that is informing the work of the 2 bullet points above?
it. Yeah, or just add down there, collaborate with other external boards, committees, or work groups, especially Measure X, since that's come up and that could touch, both of these.
Completing research memos by November, that can come out, right? For now.
Sure.
Anything else on? Did I miss anything? And let me take off the markup so you can see.
Is it just Measure X CAB?
Yes, it's called CAB. It's a Community Advisory Board. Mhm.
Yeah. But Measure X. Oh, that's right. That's right.
They're still convening because they have these funds that they need to figure out
Yes.
how they're going to. Yeah, so there's still work being done.
Yeah, I was thinking of our CAB. That's right.
Right.
That has been confusing to me at times because
There's
they're-
other CABs out there because it's a
Yes.
very common title for a
Yes.
advisory board.
Yes.
So are we good to move on to the next one?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Now this second section, excuse me. I know Lila referred back to you last year because I wasn't here for the creation of the survey. I believe we completed this section, right? The survey was pretty much done. We reported the results to the full CAB.
We did them in the fall 2020. And we chose last year not to distribute a survey since we had already
Right.
done so previously in the fall.
Right.
I guess the question is how frequent makes sense to do this survey?
So we are charged with doing it this year, I believe. Last year, the reason that we didn't do it was because it was done really late in the prior year, and it was like, we're just working with this information. And so, it's probably the earlier, the better, and the simpler and the easier to interpret, the better. So yeah, that's my understanding, is that, that the county agencies, but the preference is that this is done yearly and that we just skipped last year because of the late one the prior year.
So Nicole, is there like a process that would be shared with me or the subcommittee in reference to the creation of the survey, since I was never
So
part
the
of?
survey, the questions exist. I guess it's a matter of if the group wants to look at the questions again to see if, I think there was already some consolidation that had happened in prior years to consolidate some of the questions. I think some of them might have been redundant. But if the group wants to review maybe next, it's taking a step back. So when we brought this to the CCP, because I think one of the recommendations that we had in our prior policy brief was that we were having trouble with agencies within the county responding. CBOs were pretty responsive, but the government agencies were not as responsive as we would have liked. And so in support of us getting those responses, that we were wanting to time it with the first CCP meeting, that we're saying, make an announcement that the survey will be coming out following this, CCP meeting. So that's why we have April here, just to provide some context. So they were going to sync that up so that they can kind of help enforce that for us. It hasn't been advertised yet, but I'm assuming it's the first week of April is when they're going to convene. So with that said, if you guys do want to review the questions, should probably do that in the March meeting so that if we need to make any adjustments to the survey, we can have time to do that. Otherwise, yeah, there's not really not much to do. We would just on ORJ's end, I would follow up with Patrice and Denise and the research team to just see how we want to go about. I think we did SurveyMonkey the last time this went out, but now we have some new platforms that we're using for surveys. So we would just sync internally on that. And I don't know, maybe Lila, you can recall like who sent it out. Was it ORJ that sent out the survey, or was it someone from the subcommittee that did? Do you recall?
It was Denise.
Okay.
Denise sent it out, and I would just be careful that we do use the simplified question list for discussion, because we were asking like first and second choice in different questions, and we were asking a number of questions that were overlapping. And so a prior year spent quite a bit of time, removing redundant questions. And I will say that the results come back in a very like narrative way. And so it's just like answers, answers, answers. And so when you get these survey results back, you have 6 or 7 pages of answers, 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 and you pick out themes.
Right.
But if there is any way for the survey to like have a summarizing capacity, or, kind
Right.
of like, just something that's not like a 6 to 7 page, list of everybody's comments that they did in the survey, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I think that the questions are very open-ended, and that's why it resulted in that. There wasn't like selections that they could select from. It was, and not to say that even if you provided selections that someone might not choose other and choose to provide that narrative, but that is why you received that, was because they're all open-ended questions. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, that could be a reason why we may not have received much response from government.
It's a lot to ask for that many open-ended questions, and I think it was only 10 or 12, but it's not, if people want to give a thorough response, it's not a 5-minute survey, right? We're asking for more time from them to do that. So that might be one reason. So, but I do have that consolidated version of the questions. I can bring that back next time. ORJ internally might have, outside of myself, may have reviewed those questions. I will follow up with Patrice to see if she had any feedback for the group.
Yeah, and if Denise has any ideas, like I think it was SurveyMonkey that she did last time, which would be fine, but is there a way to utilize maybe another survey format that people can write in narrative answers, but the survey results are, there's a little bit of like organization of the data when it provides it. It's not just, 100 different answers that we have to read one by one. So, just a thought, an idea, if Denise has a solution for that, or somebody else knows, like maybe SurveyMonkey isn't the best tool this time around.
Sure, I will follow up with that.
Yeah, unless there's a capacity in SurveyMonkey to like pick out repeating words and then, list those words or those phrases at the end of the survey as well.
Okay, so I don't think that there needs to be any changes here, with the exception of, what this is informing. Like we get the survey back and we're presenting the CAB findings, recommendations in number 4. I'm assuming that the goal of this is to pull out those themes and help influence what the talking points, or I guess recommendations, ultimately will be in the policy brief. Is that an accurate assessment of what the purpose of this is? The ultimate outcome?
I understand, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's to help the committee identify areas maybe that they're missing. It will be informative. Like, we honestly took, you know, themes that came up and they were addressed within the policy, the policy recommendations. So, it informs the research and the topics this group is focusing on, and the policy recommendations as well.
okay. All right, I think we can work out some more details maybe in the next March meeting, because some questions I have is like, well, what time frame are we asking for them to report out on? Because it's going out in April. And so those are just some things I don't know if we made clear in the ask in the fall 2021, but what time frame, if it's just like the last 6 months or.
Yeah, there was significant conversation about that too, and it was like some folks didn't respond, and then we had to do another ask. And so I feel like for some reason 2 weeks sticks in my brain, but maybe it was 1 week, and then we followed up with folks who hadn't submitted their answers the second week.
Well, I was thinking of like the actual time frame that they're answering the questions for, like if we're asking about their program, like would it be what their program was, for the last 6 months, or they're responding to the question based on, the last 6 months of the program, or is it, going back a year?
They were kind of like point in time questions, most of them.
Okay.
Like, what does your program most need right now? Or what do you see as like the biggest need? So that's a great question. Mhm.
Okay. All right, so I don't think anything needs to change on that initiative. And then we're down to the needs assessment. So I'm just doing a time check, just looking at, we have 10 minutes.
I mean, for this section, I believe some of the things are going to be removed because RJ is doing them right now, right? In reference to the agency's visits. Sorry, I need my glasses. The site visits. Monique is doing that, correct?
She is doing site visits, but I think going back to the origin of this initiative was, to my understanding, one of the CAB members that's no longer on the board is way to kind of orient themselves to the programs.
Okay.
And having these site visits, as opposed to like trying to dig into the weeds of like a site visit, or it wasn't like an audit or anything like that. But yes, to answer your question, that the ORJ is starting to do regular site visits with the programs. And I know that there's a lot of work that's being discussed on what, reports coming out of our office would be looking like moving forward. So some of those changes might influence what's being done here. And unfortunately, I don't have any answers as far as what that looks like.
Were those
it's still being discussed.
Were those physical site visits or Zoom?
I don't think that this group had done any. I think that we had people come beyond just the subcommittee. We had CBOs come and do presentations at the full body. We had CBOs come to this subcommittee. To all the subcommittees had at least one, or if not two, CBOs.
Maybe instead of saying site visits, site reports.
And I think it's going back to what is it that you guys are trying to accomplish with this, as opposed to getting, into the subtask. Like, what is the overall outcome that you're seeking, and then going from there.
I mean, initially last year when I joined, I was under the impression that this section was to go out and meet the funding agencies and kind of understand how their programs are working. Not to like analyze and collect the data, but understand what services they provide, how they're providing those services, and gather information from them. We invited folks to come due to COVID, so we didn't really get to go outside and do site visits, and we were still trying to figure out if we were going to do Zoom or how are we going to complete this task. But it was to go out and actually review the programming services that are being funded for the reentry program to see how they're providing those services to the community. That was my initial take on that.
Right.
But
We
I know
don't
that,
know if we were recording by that time, but we do have a lot of recordings of all of the providers that have done a presentation.
okay,
So I don't know if it's worth continuing on a regular basis doing site visits for this particular work plan. It really just depends on what if you want to know the service are, there are some recordings that have a lot of those, rather than having them come back and do a presentation again that they just did.
I can see an advantage and physically going to some sites just to look at their operation and how they're set up. But I don't see that as being a goal for 2022 with the pandemic still hanging over us.
I like that point, Dale. You know, and I would agree with this. Like, you know, we would bat back and forth, like site visits or not site visits, and you know, we would come back to, well, maybe these can't be done in person. And I would like to see, like, you know, like as we did up above, you know, what's the priority in here? And you know, I think that the priority may be different for this group. The original intent, I think, was to identify gaps in service. So to have this understanding of the, you know, reentry services team and all the services, the reentry services community and all the services that are provided and not provided. You know, that's a very big task. And I think part of the intention was also like accountability for the agencies that are receiving money and the departments that are receiving money. And so I think it was kind of like twofold. What I like from this part here is the, you know, when we do make recommendations to have an outreach support. Sorry, let me pull it up. I can't see it there. Yeah, okay, thank you for scrolling down. I mean, I like this part that says, okay, coordinate with policy and budget to provide budget estimates recommendations. So, you know, I think that our recommendations have been fairly broad, but if we are able to provide more specific information into our recommendations, like we recommend, you know, $1 million for housing for this, and this. Yeah, that's something that I would keep from this last point, and maybe there are other pieces that you would keep. I don't know if we're going to get all the way there where we have this fleshed out, you know, recommendation, but I like the specificity that this is alluding to here. And it's up to you all if you want to make it a priority to continue to survey the whole landscape. We did a little bit of that last year, and it's a big task, and there are some, you know, there are some tools that were helpful in that. Like there was this map that came up a number of times that was, I think it was called the MET map, that was for folks who are experiencing mental health issues, and every place that they touched throughout services. But that was for mental health, and that was done probably a number of years ago. So this again is a huge area, and I would just, you know, encourage folks to keep what is most important to this group, you know, on this plan.
One thing that I have been looking at is other cabs in other counties. And I've been sitting in on the San Francisco Reentry Council, which is essentially the equivalent of this cab, but slightly different because their council, their cab has government agencies, so it's not all community driven community seats, but getting a sense of what other counties are doing for their services. I know you have here local, regional, national needs. Might looking at maybe sitting in on some of the cabs in Alameda or San Francisco, some local
Yeah,
neighboring counties to see like, what services are you guys doing?
I like that. I like that.
And I know
Nicole.
that it's not the same for each county. What San Francisco County might need versus Contra Costa might be significantly different. But that might be a place to start.
Yeah, I like that. I wonder what advantage it can be to have the national needs listed here. Or national, certainly local and regional, those are really pertinent as you're pointing out, but I don't know what value, and if we're spending time and energy, what we can really benefit from national. Maybe we can, I don't know, but
I mean, I sometimes send you guys stuff that's webinars that's like a national webinar on the specific reentry topic. But that's the extent of on a national side, at least from.
I think that sounds great. I mean, if we look at what's said here at the second point, I would be comfortable taking out national needs. And, if we want to add in, local cabs somewhere, these smaller, able to do activities, can be helpful, because yes, this subcommittee does want to have its finger on and an understanding in general of the services, but like, visiting another cab is more realistic than, coming up with a map of all services for the program. And I don't, now that I reread this, I don't actually see that was what was suggested. I don't know if you want to leave the third bullet point there, Nicole. What do you think about write a memo to CCP with the recommendation and have an outreach campaign to support the initiative? I mean, if we
Well, I
come
feel
up
like that's your recommendations that you guys do as a full body already. So it's not really coming out of this subcommittee, it's from the full body. That you're already having that, right? Unless this is very specific to.
And we would be
tying back to the
submitting it.
above.
We would be submitting it to the full cab, right? And that's if we, I don't know, do we need I guess we do need a memo. Maybe we keep that there and we do away with the white paper and it's more of a memo.
maybe we should say write a memo for CCP, because we might want to write the memo to CAB, for the purpose of CCP. But do
I guess I'm just trying to understand how would this be different from the policy brief that you guys already submit to CCP? Wouldn't whatever comes out of this initiative be included in the recommendations that the full body is presenting?
Why don't you add that, to be included in CAB recommendations? So this
I think that's what I feel like that's what bullet point 1 is saying, that you're coordinating with policy and budget to provide budget estimates and recommendations. That is the policy brief.
I would assume it's not our role from this committee to communicate directly to CCP.
No. You would come from the full body.
Yes.
I do like the language memo. Maybe we just do the first point, coordinate with policy and budget to provide memo. So we're giving them something in writing that are, that's the result of the work of this committee that we, hope to have included in the policy recommendation.
Then get rid of the third one. Oops, providing one.
And maybe the first point, you just say conduct qualitative interviews with providers as identified, because this committee is not going to just try to visit every single provider out there, but they might want to invite in some housing providers or visit a housing provider, because that's
As
what the
needed?
focus of this committee is. Yeah, and
needed.
sorry. So it would be on number 2, conduct
Oh, here.
qualitative interviews with providers as needed, and then you delete the first point, site visits to AB 109 funded agencies. I mean, it's a nice idea, but I don't think this committee is really going to go out and visit all of these, service providers. And I think that that's happening in other spaces, like we already mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, like ORJ.
And I think as far as the timeline, I don't think you need to have these details. It's just more of like, again, getting it in front of August, like we talked about in the first initiative.
Yes.
Having that done in August in time to influence policy and budget, and then essentially the full body recommendation.
Nicole, should under coordinate with policy and budget to provide a memo, should the memo, should we say to CAB? I mean,
Well, policy and budget is CAB subcommittee, so I think it's
Yeah.
implied, unless others feel differently.
Maybe we provide a memo to policy and
Yes,
budget.
yes.
Because it just hasn't happened. Yeah. Thank you, Dale.
But what are we going to, so we're going to provide a memo concerning what?
Our findings.
Yes, that's a good point. Of the findings or something like that.
Because this one says up above to present to full CAB, but then this one below is saying to provide this particular subcommittee a memo.
And it would probably have to go through the CAB before it goes to the policy and budget subcommittee. I mean, it seems like that's how things end up working.
So do we even need that then? If it's covered up above, do we need that first?
Maybe it's a duplicate of this.
I feel
Number
like
3.
the first one is more broad and the second one is a specific idea. And so maybe this provide memo to policy and budget subcommittee belongs up at the top with housing and restorative justice, the areas that we'll be focusing on. But I know we're out of time too. So, and I tend to have lots of thoughts and ideas when the meeting's supposed to end.
I think it's in a good place. You guys accomplished a lot. So
Yes, I agree. This is wonderful.
It feels more doable than prior work plans too. So congratulations on that. It feels like there are to-do items that folks can get busy on and, get started with. It's great.
So I will bring this back in the next meeting just so that we have it to reference. I think we might need to just clean up a couple of items, but Nicole, I don't feel like I'm taking over your role. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I just wanted to recap next steps because it seems like some action items coming through from
No, go ahead, Nicole. You
ORJs.
can wrap it up. After the last hour and a half, my brain went like that.
So I was just recapping the next steps for, I guess the next meeting is to bring this back
Yes.
so that we can just put a bow on it. And then also to review the survey, just to see if there's any last comments or strategies there with that.
Well, and you are going to get a feedback from Patrice, right?
Yes, and I want to follow up on the Measure X piece just so that we can
Yeah.
conform our projects on advocacy.
I
and
would
with
also
that. And it
add,
probably will be an attachment for you guys to review ahead of the meeting where it'll probably specify what is it about the housing and the restorative justice funding that was allocated with Measure X funds. What does that look like?
and I would just add, to check in with Denise ahead of next meeting around if there's a survey format that can provide more actionable survey results.
Okay. All right. Oh, and then before we adjourn, I definitely want to just confirm. So right now, the cadence, or at least the cadence last year, was the third Tuesday from 11:30 to 1. I know that we had today's meeting rescheduled for today because we couldn't do last Thursdays at 11:30 to 1. That cadence still works for everybody.
So that would be when?
So the next meeting would be, I believe, let me look at my
17th.
calendar. The 17th at 11:30, Thursday the 17th at 11:30.
Yeah, I had that written down, so I guess that we had.
I
to
know
set-
that we've had a conflict as ORJ internally, and we can try to work that out with just our staff, but because we have a 1 o'clock with our job right after. And so the way I've been managing that, and Lila and Nicole know this, is I've had to jump off like around 1:45. I'm sorry, not 1:45, 12:45. So if that's not working, then we might need to move this up to maybe 11. So just wanted to call that out.
Got it. 11
I was
would
gonna say,
work
I'm
for me,
okay
but
with it. Yeah,
11 works?
yes.
Okay. Dale, it works for you, 11? So
Yeah,
that'd be 11 to 12:30 then, 11 a.m. to 12, and then I'll update the invite to reflect that. But it'll still be every third Thursday.
uh-huh.
Okay. All right.
Great.
That's all I had. And then Dale, if you have questions about the report out, reach out to me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think you said that and Nicole G was going to do the report out at the next CAB meeting, and then I could observe how she does that.
Right, she'll be actually doing the report out verbally, but we actually need an attachment, report out.
Oh,
That's the template that I delivered to you all, I think yesterday or early this morning, I can't remember. But I can follow up with you offline about that.
okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm. Okay,
That's it.
all right, 11:39.
On that.
Thanks for hanging in there, everyone,
Thank you.
and have a great
Thank
weekend.
you. Bye.